So,
a couple later on.
like to recognize Rabbi Braun. Yeah, sorry that we don't have any Linzer tarts for you, but nice to meet you. We're on page 436 in the bilingual edition. If you want to get a bilingual edition, you get it. Amazon has it. Judaica Plaza has it. The one we're using is Tevunos, Knowing God's Plan, with a new translation and extensive annotation. The Torah Classics Library. It's Feldheim. There's an older one. Actually, the older one, my Yeshiva edited. This one he didn't edit. Okay, page 436, which is in the middle of Siman. Kufnun Beis. It's very chashuv. We're going to take what you say more seriously. We're towards the end of Kuf Nun Beis.
People don't try to take over.
No. It's harder than it looks. Hard work. Okay. Nimsa b'yadeinu shalosh madregos hashba'at yisbarach. We find there are three levels of Hashem's emanations in the world. Harishayna, hashba'at shel agashmius she'osa hadvarim hashvalim. One is the emanation of physicality, which makes lower things in the world, lower beings. Vashniya, the second hashba'at, hashba'at haruchanios hagamor. This is something which is a hashpa of complete spirituality. Perush shia kol ha'olam is halach b'derech hakedusha legamri b'chol chalakav. This hashpa makes that the entire world will go in a way of spirituality. V'hashpa shlishis, the third hashpa, he hashpa hamerkavas ha'ara b'toch ha'chaymer. This is a hashpa which has light within the physicality. So we have a hashpa of physicality, one of pure spirituality, and one of spirituality within the physicality. Perush. This third hashpa is where you could have spiritual things even in our physical world. Right now we live in a physical world, so this third hashpa makes it able that we can have spirituality in the physical world. But the difference is, what's the difference between the second hashpa and the third hashpa? The second hashpa is spirituality which will change physicality. We talked about that la'aseh love in the world to come, that the physical world will actually be transformed into a spiritual state. So he says that's the second hashpa. But the third hashpa is spirituality, but it doesn't change the physicality. That's like the hashpa we have now. We live in a primarily physical world, but there are infusions of spirituality. El mishatefes elav ve'ara be'osa madrega shemeshatefes. Va'amnam hashpa hashlishis hazos einam min hashpa shniya ki harei osa hashpa maveres hachoshesh shel chamrios v'zos einam maveres. The difference is that the second one of pure spirituality will totally take away and change physicality, but the third hashpa of spirituality does not change physicality. Amnam hipchusa min hashenis. It comes from the second one, but it's really lower than the second one. V'rak nigzeres menu ki gam hi inyana ruchanios ve'ara. Aval aboris baruch shmo shechidesh kol metzios hanimtzos chidesh kol minim ha'ela b'hashpa dehainu min hashpa mekadeshes legamre hamushpa mimenu umin amin hazeh gazer min hasheni shemekadesh ach lo legamre hamushpa mimenu. Like we just said, that Hashem made this hashpa which will transform the reality into a spiritual reality, and this is what's, I'm adding parenthetically, this is what's going to happen after Mashiach comes and after the resurrection of the dead, that Hashem is going to utilize this second hashpa, this second spiritual emanation to transform the physical world. But the one we have, there is another hashpa, a third hashpa, which comes from the second hashpa. It's just not as powerful in the sense that it infuses the world with spirituality that we as physical beings can tap into and connect with Hashem, but it's not powerful enough to actually transform the way we are. Perhaps there were a few people in history that happened to him, maybe Eliyahu, Hanavi, perhaps. He doesn't say this here, but I'm just suggesting maybe that Eliyahu Hanavi, but for the regular people, the spirituality will not totally impact, will not change the physicality. Now, I don't think that means that it can't impact it at all. You see very holy people, sometimes there's like a glow in their face, which the Ramchal himself mentioned before. Right? I once, my friend and I from an Alpin many years ago went to Rav Elyashiv for Havdalah, and my friend looked at him after Havdalah, and he looks at me and he says, he was glowing. You know, there was just something about Rav Elyashiv's face. And my Rashiv used to say about there's a lot of kids on Yeshiva Lane in Baltimore, where I went to Yeshiva, a lot of Jewish children that learn Torah all day, and they're not bar mitzvah yet, so they don't have any averos. And he said, you just look at a Jewish kid, there's something special. A Jewish kid that's sitting learning Torah all day in Cheder, there's a shine in their face, So could be the spiritual does impact the physical, but the fundamental difference between the second and third hashpah is that the second one will totally transform the physical, the third one will not. And then Hashem also made hashpah, which just makes physicality. So those are the two spiritual hashpahs we're talking about. There's also hashpah physicality. Hashem, we have bodies. The bodies by themselves as animals, these are not necessarily holy things. These are physical things. And then Hashem combined the first and second hashpah to make whatever level he wanted. In different combinations. Now Hashem made different times and different ways that there's, right, it's not the same level that Hashem is infusing the world with spirituality. There are different times when there's more spirituality, when there's less spirituality. Now when there's more spirituality, it makes it easier to connect with Hashem. And he says, I mean, even within a person, there is times of illumination of spirituality. Now you look at the world in general, what's an expression of the spirituality? Hashem put a Torah in the world. He put divine inspiration in people, right? There's such a thing. We don't have prophecy anymore, but we have people that a very holy person could get divine inspiration where he knows what's going to happen in the future, things like that. A very deep connection with Hashem. And like we explained.
So another time, what's the difference between the third hashpah and this? This sounds like it's something different.
I thought here he was just explaining the third.
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought. But
in other words, if he's not, then you also are with me that you don't understand.
Right.
Okay.
Right. V'hinei, kanhu b'yichud makom his chalaf hazmanim l'chol l'kodesh. Now we have here in our world that there are different times where it goes from, well, for lack of a better word, he says ordinary here. They usually say chol is profane. I don't think people like the profane. It's like par, right? Today's Sunday. There's nothing intrinsically holy about Sunday. But there's some times of holiness. When you have we have this combination between physicality and spirituality. Sometimes Hashem, like we just said, makes more spirituality. That's why we have Shabbos is holier than any other day of the week, because on that day, on Shabbos, Hashem infuses the world with more spirituality. Now, the spirituality that he's infusing is not the spirituality that we don't just literally become angels on Shabbos and we don't have a physical body. No, we're still in the physical world. But Hashem infuses the world with more spirituality. Now, what does that make a difference? It makes a difference because it's easier to connect with Hashem. You learn Torah, very often you learn Torah on Shabbos, you could understand things that you weren't able to understand during the week when you're studying Torah. You have more of an inspiration on Shabbos to perhaps daven more with kavanah, to do more mitzvos, to feel more connected, b'dveikus, to connect with Hashem. Because Hashem facilitates it on Shabbos by infusing the world with more spirituality. Now that doesn't mean that these things are impossible to do during the week. It just means it's easier to do on Shabbos. Mikol shar yomim yan ki yigbo yarba hadan baruchu lashpia b'ashpot aruchanis v'elokiyus shezacharnu v'chol shar yomim tovim also Yom Tov madrigasim kachim. There are different levels. Yomim shashpa aruchanis rabba behem b'seder madriga ruya. On the level, right, we have days like Yom Tov, we have days like Shabbos, so it's easy to connect to Hashem. I mentioned this story before, but I think it's very nice. That I forgot who he said from. My Shiva said there was a big rub. There's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, in the code of Jewish law. If you don't know what day is Shabbos, you're lost in the forest, and I don't know, in the desert or somewhere, and you don't know what day it is. So there's a halacha. You count 7 days and you keep Shabbos. You make kiddush on the 7th day. So you shouldn't forget about Shabbos, even though it might not be Shabbos, but you count 7 days. So there's a great rabbi asked, said, how could you not know when Shabbos is? You just feel it. You know when Shabbos is, because this rabbi was on such a high level that he didn't understand the rule in Shulchan Aruch. He could just feel when Shabbos is because of the holiness of the day. And the truth is, you don't have to be a great rabbi to feel it. And once you start, you keep Shabbos and you start a little bit of a spiritual sensitivity, you realize that Shabbos is different than the rest of the week. Okay. That's why we shouldn't discern. I think Ritzi Meyer, I don't know if it's true, they say Ritzi Meyer is a big rabbi in Jerusalem, very holy rabbi. I heard he doesn't sleep on Shabbos at all, because he doesn't want to lose 1 second of the holiness to sleep. Don't waste. He wants to utilize every second of Shabbos to connect with Hashem. Okay. Vod Odiach Hakadami Karis. Vihi. I want to tell you an important introduction. Vihi. Kihine.
Don't try that at home.
What?
Don't try that at home.
Why not? You go to bed, sleep a little Friday afternoon, sleep a little after Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos, and then he keeps Shabbos longer. He keeps Shabbos going. The dancing. If you're ever in Israel, go see Rav Tzvi Meyer. Is it Kumsitz? You could finish Shabbos very late, and you could have a pizza, and then you go over to his house. He's still having Shal Shudas and singing and speaking words of Torah. Okay, let's just finish till Kufna and Gimel. I want to tell you a very important introduction. There was a great fall in the status of humanity. This is the fall that happened after Adam sinned. This is we've mentioned this before, but this is the source. We don't realize that when Adam sinned by eating from the tree of knowledge, that we know the story, he got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, he wasn't allowed to come back in. We don't realize that not only was he punished, but the entire world changed in its makeup. He says here that what we considered spiritual, let's say, for example, our soul, it's a spiritual thing. Can you see your soul? Can you touch your soul? What color is your soul? Right? Questions are silly because it's spiritual. It's in a different dimension. What Adam's physicality, his body, was equal to our spirituality. So that's why it says the level we're on now, we wouldn't have been able to see Adam before he sinned. He was on such a high level that what we call spiritual was his physical. Now that doesn't mean he didn't exist. He did exist. There was a real place called the Garden of Eden. There was Adam and Chava, and there was a snake and all that things, but it was on a totally different spiritual plane. That's why you can't go like searching in the jungles of Africa thinking you're going to find the Garden of Eden according to the Ramchal, because it's a place which is on a different plane of existence. It's not on our plane of existence. But now when he sinned, that's when everything changed. His spiritual became physical, and the way we find ourselves now. Now, what we have to do is, before anything happens, we talk about the rectification of the world, bringing Mashiach, we talk about Olam Haba in the next world. The first thing we have to do is get to the point of Adam before he sinned. Right? The entire world transforms. So we have to transform the world back to the level of Adam before he sinned. That's the first thing we have to take care of. I just read in the Never Shechayim over Shabbos, he says that, what's something that happened that after Adam sinned? That death was decreed on the world. Now, the Never Shechayim points out this actually wasn't a punishment. It was actually a very good thing that human beings had to die. So the reason is, before Adam sinned, evil was external, represented by the snake, the serpent. Evil was separate from a human. Now, human beings definitely had free will, but there was a certain level of evil which existed outside of Adam. When Adam sinned, evil entered him in an irbubia. It became a mess. People now are a mixture of good and evil. You have that evil inside of us. This is the only way to rectify a human after that happened, that evil went inside a person, is that a person has to die. Because the only way to get that evil out is that a person dies and gets resurrected. So Navi Shechem says it was actually a chesed, a kindness from Hashem, that human beings die, because otherwise a human being, if he would live forever, he would live forever not being perfected and living forever with evil inside of him. That would be a very horrible thing. First we have to complete the world in this lowly level, fix the world in our lowly level, and get as much light into the world as possible according to this lowly level. Then we'll be uplifted from our situation. And from here we'll go from level to level. Right? First we have to get to Adam, the level of Adam before he sinned. Then we're going to have resurrection of the dead, and then Olam Haba, and then even within Olam Haba we're going to go level upon higher level. And now this is actually going to tie nicely what I just mentioned from the Nefesh Chaim, because next is going to talk about how Hashem punishes us, right? Because this whole section that we're learning now is of Midas HaMishpat, the attribute of Hashem's justice. He's going to discuss how Hashem's justice is actually done out of kindness. We already see death, right? It's a horrible thing, death, right? Nobody's looking forward to death, and someone dies, it's a horrible tragedy. But in the end, when you look at the whole picture and you look at it from a purely intellectual point of view, we realize that death is actually a chesed, a kindness, because if we were to live forever in the way that we are now, we would live forever with evil inside of us, and we would never be perfected. We would never reach our potential. So death was something which is necessary, which came to the world. In the next section, the Ramchal is going to discuss how punishment, things that seem horrible, are actually a kindness, a chesed from Hashem.